Right now, as you listen to these words, something is happening that science cannot explain. Not because science has not tried, not because the right experiment has not been run yet, not because the right technology is still being developed, but because the thing that is happening right now as you sit here and experience these words may be genuinely beyond what science as we currently understand it is capable of explaining. The thing that is happening is this. You are experiencing something. The sound of this voice has a quality. The warmth of the tea in your hand, if you have it, has a feeling. The particular mood you are in right now, whatever it is, has a texture, a tone, a color that is entirely your own and that no one else in the world can access. This seems so ordinary that it barely seems worth mentioning. Of course you experience things. Of course there is something it is like to be you. What else would there be? And yet, when scientists and philosophers look carefully at this fact, the fact that you have an inner experience, a subjective life, a felt quality to your existence, they find something that stops them completely. They can describe the physical events happening in your body. They can trace the electrical signals traveling through your nervous system. They can map the chemical processes occurring in your cells. They can identify the precise neural correlates of every perception and emotion and thought. But none of that description, however detailed and precise, explains why any of it feels like anything at all. Why is there something it is like to see the color red? Why does music produce the sensation it produces rather than just processing as information? Why does the experience of loss feel the way it feels, that specific, irreplaceable weight, rather than simply being a cognitive update that a relationship has ended? This gap between the physical description of a process and the felt quality of experiencing it is what philosopher David Chalmers named in 1995. He called it the hard problem of consciousness. And in the 30 years since he named it, it has not been solved. It has barely been approached. It remains the deepest and most stubbornly mysterious question in all of science and philosophy. Settle in, pour your tea, and let us think about this together. To understand why the hard problem is hard, we need to first understand what would count as solving it. And to understand that, we need to distinguish between two very different kinds of problems about the mind. Chalmers called them the easy problems and the hard problem, and he was careful to note that the easy problems are not actually easy. They are enormously complex. Decades of research have gone into each of them, but they are the kind of problems that science knows how to approach. They have the right shape for scientific investigation. The easy problems include things like, how does the brain integrate information from different senses? How does attention work? How do we distinguish sleeping from waking? How do we generate and control behavior? How do we access our own mental states and report on them? These are difficult questions, but they are functional questions. They ask, what does the brain do and how does it do it? And science is very good at answering functional questions. You find the mechanism, you trace the process, you explain the function. The hard problem is different in kind, not just in degree. The hard problem asks, why is there any subjective experience at all? Even if you fully explained every function, even if you knew the complete story of how the brain integrates information and directs attention and generates behavior, you would still not have explained why any of that processing is accompanied by experience, why there is something it is like to be the system doing all that processing. A philosophical thought experiment makes this vivid. Imagine a being, called a philosophical zombie, that is physically identical to you in every single way, atom for atom, neuron for neuron. Every process in its body is exactly the same as every process in yours. It behaves exactly as you do. It responds to pain as you respond to pain. It says it sees red when it sees red. But inside, there is nothing, no experience, no felt quality, no inner life. The lights are on mechanically, but nobody is home. The question the hard problem asks is, Why are you not like that? What is the difference between you and this philosophical zombie? And the disturbing answer that science has not been able to provide is we do not know. We cannot point to the physical feature that makes the difference between processing and experiencing. Now, I want to be precise here, because the hard problem is sometimes dismissed as not a real problem, as a confusion, a linguistic mistake, a gap that will eventually be filled by better neuroscience. Some philosophers, particularly those committed to a fully physical view of reality, argue that consciousness will eventually be explained in physical terms, that the feeling of difficulty around the hard problem is itself an illusion, that once we understand enough about information processing and neural dynamics, the mystery will dissolve. This is a coherent position. Intelligent people hold it, and it may even be correct. But it faces a serious challenge because whenever someone proposes a physical account of consciousness, whenever someone describes a neural process and says this is what experience is, a response is always available. You have described the mechanism, but you have not explained why the mechanism is accompanied by experience rather than simply running in the dark. The philosopher Joseph Levine called this the explanatory gap, the logical distance between any physical description and any subjective experience. You can bridge many gaps with enough detail and enough science, but this particular gap has a strange quality. It seems to widen the more you look at it carefully. The hard problem becomes even more unsettling when you extend it beyond humans. Is there something it is like to be a dog? Almost certainly, yes. Most people's intuitions and most scientific evidence point in this direction. Dogs have nervous systems. They process pain and pleasure. They have emotional states that influence behavior. The lights, so to speak, appear to be on. What about an octopus? More uncertain, but octopuses have complex nervous systems, solve problems, respond to their environment in sophisticated ways. Many researchers think there is probably something it is like to be one. What about a bee? The nervous system is simpler, but bees navigate, learn, communicate. Is there any experience in there, any felt quality to the processing? What about a single neuron, a bacterium, a thermostat? Somewhere along this progression from human to animal to insect to machine, experience presumably stops, or perhaps diminishes, or perhaps takes forms so alien to our own that we cannot recognize them. But where and why there? What is the physical property that separates systems that experience from systems that do not? Science has no answer, and this matters enormously right now in 2026. Because the question of machine consciousness has moved from science fiction into urgent practical ethics. As artificial intelligence systems become more sophisticated, as they generate responses that seem thoughtful, that seem to reflect on themselves, that produce outputs suggesting something like inner states, the question of whether they experience anything at all becomes not just philosophically interesting, but morally urgent. If an AI system genuinely suffers, if there is something it is like to be it, and if some of those experiences are painful, then we have moral obligations toward it that we are currently ignoring entirely. And if it does not experience anything, if it is a philosophical zombie that merely processes and outputs, then we are in danger of being deceived by a very sophisticated performance of experience. We cannot currently tell the difference. We do not have a theory of consciousness that would tell us what to look for, and the hard problem is exactly why. Let us look at the main positions philosophers have taken in response to the hard problem, because they are genuinely fascinating, and they reveal just how radical the solutions need to be if the problem is real. The first position is physicalism, sometimes called materialism. The view that consciousness is entirely physical, that experience is identical to or emerges from physical processes in the brain, that once we understand enough, the hard problem will dissolve. The challenge for physicalism, as we have seen, is explaining how physical processes give rise to subjective experience, how the firing of neurons becomes the felt quality of seeing blue, how chemistry becomes the experience of grief. The most popular physicalist response is called functionalism, the idea that what matters for consciousness is not the physical substrate, not neurons specifically, but the pattern of information processing. If a system processes information in the right way, if it has the right functional organization, it is conscious. The hardware does not matter, only the software. Functionalism explains why we might expect AI systems to eventually be conscious, if consciousness is about information processing patterns, and if AI systems eventually process information in the right patterns, then consciousness follows. But functionalism faces a challenge too. It seems to imply that the philosophical zombie is impossible, that any system with the right functional organization must be conscious. And yet, many people find it deeply imaginable that a system could have the right functional organization and still not experience anything. The second major position is dualism, the view that mind and matter are genuinely different kinds of things, that experience cannot be reduced to or explained by physical processes because it is not fundamentally physical. Dualism captures something that physicalism struggles with, the intuition that the felt quality of experience is genuinely different in kind from any physical description. But it creates its own problem. If mind and matter are truly different, how do they interact? How does a non-physical experience cause a physical action? How does physical light entering the eye become the non-physical felt quality of seeing? The third position, and perhaps the most radical, is panpsychism, the view that experience is not something that emerges at a certain level of physical complexity. It is a fundamental feature of reality itself, present in some form, however primitive and alien, in all matter, even in the simplest physical systems. On this view, electrons do not think. They do not feel pain or joy in any recognizable sense, but they have some primitive form of inner quality, some infinitesimal form of experience that scales up as physical systems become more complex until it eventually reaches the rich inner life of a human being. Panpsychism sounds strange, almost mystical, and for most of the 20th century it was dismissed entirely. But in recent years, as the hard problem has become more widely recognized as genuinely difficult, panpsychism has made a quiet and surprising comeback. Respected philosophers like David Chalmers, Galen Strawson, and Philip Goff have argued that it may be the most coherent solution available, that it is less strange than it sounds when you think carefully about what the alternatives require. Because if experience does not emerge from non-experience, if there is genuinely no way to get from unconscious physical processes to the rich felt life of a conscious being, then perhaps experience was always already there in some form, hidden in the fabric of reality, waiting for complexity to reveal it. I want to close with something personal, something that I think the hard problem gives us, not just as a puzzle to solve, but as a way of seeing. Most of the time, we move through our experience without attending to it, without noticing that it is there, without finding it remarkable that there is something it is like to be us. We look through our experience at the world rather than at the experience itself. The hard problem invites us to turn that gaze around, to look at experience directly, to notice that right now, in this moment, there is something happening that is genuinely extraordinary, a felt quality to existence that no physical description fully captures, a subjectivity that is yours alone and that no other being in the universe can share. The philosopher Thomas Nagel wrote that what makes the hard problem hard is that we cannot imagine how to explain it from the outside. We cannot step outside of experience to see it objectively. We are already inside it. We are the very thing we are trying to understand. And perhaps that is not a limitation. Perhaps that is simply what it is to be a conscious being in a universe that still holds genuine mysteries. Perhaps the most honest thing science has given us, in all its extraordinary power and precision, is a clear view of what it cannot yet explain. And what it cannot yet explain is you, your experience, this moment, this felt quality of being that is happening right now as you listen. That is not a failure. That is an invitation. Before you leave this moment, I want to offer you one question to carry with you. Right now, in this moment, what does it actually feel like to be you? Not what you think, not what you would say if someone asked, but what does the raw, felt quality of your existence feel like from the inside right now? Sit with that for a moment, because you are not just a person asking the question. You are the question itself. This is GreenTea English. Thank you for thinking with me today. See you in the next one.